Hey everyone, this is Chris.
And Lorenzo.
And welcome to our Best of Saturday series. Now that we have hundreds of episodes, we get a lot of listeners asking us where to start.
So we'll be selecting some of our most popular episodes to share each Saturday from our years of podcasting. We hope you enjoy it.
No role plays, just real. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader.
We've never really, as a workforce, spent a lot of time on making sure we're developing good leaders.
We'll be able to share stories, experience, mistakes, failures, successes.
This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, on today's episode, what I'd like to talk about is how leaders go about managing high-performance teams. I think this is important to talk about because it looks very different than leading a team of people who are not high-performing. Maybe you inherited a team that is underperforming and you're trying to get them there. That looks different than if you inherit a team that is already high-performing, or if you've taken the steps and done the work to get your underperforming team to become a high-performing team. And now, how does your leadership style have to change? And that's probably the area or the scenario where you could encounter the most pitfalls. Because if you inherit a team that is high performing, it's assumed you know how to lead a high performing team. And if you take over a team that is underperforming, what they need from you as a leader will look very different than what a team needs from you who is already high performing. And I heard an analogy a long time ago about how a high school basketball coach will coach that team very differently than Phil Jackson coaches the Lakers or the Bulls, because it becomes, there's a difference when every single player can outperform you as the coach on what you're trying to teach them how to do. And the level of humility, the level of ego, the level, all the things you bring to that table, they have to still want to follow you. They still have to anoint you as their leader and accept you as their leader, even if they already know how to do all these things. And what you're teaching them is less about how to do their job and more about how to maintain this status as a high-performing team. And so, first of all, do you have any experience in your life where you took over a team that was not a high-performing team? You took the time, the months, maybe a year or more to get them there, and then all of a sudden you had to take a step back and think, my leadership style has to change now. What they needed from me before, they don't need now. They need something very differently, and maybe you had to call upon some things inside you that you hadn't had to call upon before.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had the unique honor of doing that many times, where it's been a fun journey to step into an environment where there was a lot of heavy lifting to do to get a team from maybe performing to expectations or below expectations, and then really getting into a space where they are exceeding expectations. And I've had opportunities to walk in where teams were doing a really great job already and just needed to maintain that and continue to grow on that. I think the interesting thing that you were talking about, and I was thinking about as you were kind of walking through it, is that idea of continually, we always talk about meeting people where they're at,
right?
And we talk a lot on this show about kind of the building blocks, the foundation, the theories of answering questions of how to solve for this or solve for that, or how to we did the culture acronym to kind of help people walk through how do you impact culture. But I like this episode where we're going to talk about I think the differences between leading a high-performing team and either a mediocre or underperforming team, because it is very, very different, but it's still down the same idea of meeting them where they're at. And my belief is, if you're developing a team where you've done the work, so not where you take over a high-performing team and now you're looking at kind of maintenance and in fine tuning, when you are the leader who has grown that team to the point where they are today, a part of that growth, I firmly believe, is in the development of the leaders and the layers that you have of that entire team. So the quick answer for me is you really start to lead at a higher level, and you really start to allow those leaders that you've developed to do a lot of the work that you had done previously as a part of their own development.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think another part of it too is if you're the leader who grew the team from one that was underperforming to one that is now high performing, there's a credibility you have as the person who got them there or who was on that journey with them, versus if the team overall is high performing, you don't necessarily have that same level of authority as you would if you were the person who grew that team that way.
Or more importantly, trust and respect. Right?
Exactly. The authority comes from the trust and the respect.
Absolutely.
So I want to go over 3 different elements here that I think look very different if you're a leader and you're trying to take a team. You've already taken a team that is low performing, they're now high performing, and now how do you have to treat some of these things differently than you treated them before? And the first one is one that I really enjoy talking about, and we've talked about it in other contexts before, and that's just the concept of individual strengths. So whether you have 5 people or 50 people on your team, they each have individual strengths, and what it looks like to lead a team of people based on their strengths when you're trying to grow the team into high performance is different than if you already have that high performing team. And what does it look like to make sure that you are keeping in mind and recognizing the strengths of each individual on your team? So, I mean, how do you think that looks different to a high performing team versus one that is still growing?
Yeah, I think with the growth team, it's really helping them understand, not only what their strengths are, but how do you align their strengths with the work that needs to get done? Like that's a big part of it. And we talked about it in the culture acronym around utilizing strengths,
Right.
like understanding what they are and then aligning them with the work that, that will kind of ignite their passions and really allow them to do great work. I think that's what you look at and what you see when you're working with kind of a growth team or you're in the process of getting a team to becoming high performing. When you're in the high performing space, it's understanding not just, what the strengths are of everybody, because now we're in a space where everybody's aligned. They're doing what they're passionate about or what they're really good at. They're enjoying it. And now the output is fantastic performance. But it's also understanding at that level that everybody has a different strength and not one is not better than the other.
Yeah, I think one of the pitfalls that occurs in situations like this, and I can only speak from my history in a retail environment, is that there were certain pathways that you were supposed to take if you wanted to grow within the organization in one direction versus another. So I knew that if I wanted to be a general manager of a store, the right way was not to go be the inventory and shrink manager or to be the labor and operations manager. It was to be the sales manager, because the sales manager is the one that got promoted to run the store. And I think the tendency of organizations to look within that comfortable cycle of promotion is what creates this tendency to try to put a hierarchy into a lot of different strengths. And so if you are leading a high-performance team, I think one of the best things you can do is to show people that regardless of where their strengths lie, they can continue to move up within the organization. And you have to kind of be on purpose about doing that, which means that you have to understand that just because the last 5 people to get this spot came from this pathway, it doesn't mean that's the right answer. It just means that maybe those 5 people were the best people for the job. But it could also mean that some really great talent was overlooked. And a high-performance team is one where you're not just siloed into this mindset of, oh, well, the sales manager becomes the general manager. It could be the operations manager. It could be the inventory manager. It could be somebody that came up from a different pathway. So if you're a leader of a high-performance team, to kind of start thinking in the mindset of not having these blinders on to think that, okay, if you're in this role, this is the next step for you. Or if you're in this role, this is the next step for you. It's all people skills. And if you're in a high performance team, there is going to be some bleed over, and you need to be able to make sure that anybody in that team can kind of move up or feels like they can move up. Otherwise, all you're going to have is this kind of clamoring to move into this one pathway that is thought to be the only one that will get you a leg up.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think a lot of the the new opportunities now, and a lot of where organizations are going is understanding that when businesses want you to bring your whole self to work, and when companies get really great at recruiting and finding great talented people from different industries and different walks of life and all that type of stuff, what you end up having is people that can accelerate very quickly, people that are ready for more faster than others, people that can come into an organization at the same level, and then very quickly somebody can separate and go, into a new job or to a new field or do something different, based upon the fact that they are more comfortable in the work that's being prescribed for that same role that each person has. So, yeah, I think that it's we're moving more into that place where the value of an individual is actually tied to the individual versus the title of the job that the individual is in.
The next one I want to talk about is around goal setting, because no matter where you are and whether you are, I think there can be a tendency on high performance teams to move away from setting goals. I've seen it happen several times where goal setting becomes what you're doing when you're striving for something. And then when you reach this level where you feel like everything's a well-oiled machine, everybody's doing well, you're hitting the goals that you're supposed to hit, that there becomes almost this tendency to move away from setting goals, or at least not take them as seriously, because you feel like, oh, we're good at this. Almost like I've learned how to hit goals. I don't need to continue maintaining it anymore. And I think that can be a problem, but I don't think a lot of leaders necessarily know how the concept of goals and focusing on them looks differently for a high performance team versus one that you're still trying to become high performance. So what do you think the differences are there?
Goals are extremely important. We've talked about it before. It's not that the metric and the number is all that matters all the time. But when we say goal setting, that's the first thing people think about. Is like, oh, it's a number I have to go hit, or it's a
right.
It's a business metric, it's a budget, like that type of thing. No, goal setting is goal setting. We set goals around development, we set goals around business, we set goals around, commitments, we set goals around community. Goals are just goals. And I think when you are growing a team, goal setting is imperative because you want to be able to see milestones. You want to be able to provide people with, accolades and recognition when they start to see their work come together. And they start to understand the larger vision, and they realize that, these things are important. There's a reason why we're here, and there's a reason why we're expected to show up and do what the organization is asking us to do. And so you have these goals, and they're realistic, and they're achievable, and they're SMART goals, or pick your acronym, but they allow teams to understand that there is an expectation around making sure we do good work and we get better at the work that we do. When it comes to a high-performing team, what I have learned and realized is that you stop setting goals in comparison to others. So many times in an organization or in retail or other places, your goals are set by what others are doing, or the goals are set on what you did last year. This is what we did last year. We want X amount of growth this year in these things. Here's what our new goal is. I believe that in high-performing teams, the goals they set are only compared to themselves. They lose this idea of we just have to be better than everybody else, and they land on this idea of we just need to be the best versions of ourselves and see how high is high and do things that nobody thought they could do. Because if we just compare ourselves to others, then we're limiting our output because that can get easy over time. Or if others get lax, then we also get lax, but we do just enough more to be able to beat them.
I mean, that's a really tough transition, though. Like if you're a leader of a team that is a high performance team, it's almost I don't know if it's cultural or if it's in our DNA or something that just says that. I mean, when you run a race, you know that there's a reason why world records are only set at the Olympics. It's because there's something about what happens when you are running against people who are the best in the world that causes you to be the best version of yourself. So if it seems like a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you're more likely to do your best work when you are comparing yourself to other people. But on the flip side, it could also be very limiting in terms of comparing yourself to other people. So how would a high-performance team leader make sure that those goals are grounded in that and that they stop their team members reverting, from secretly looking at how other teams are doing and grounding themselves in, okay, I'm doing better than this team member, so at least if someone pulls me aside and says, hey, you can do better, my knee jerk isn't to say, but I'm the best of all these 10 people. You don't want them saying that. How do you stop that from happening?
I don't know that you can ever stop it. I think even when you are working with a high-performing team where you're comparing yourself to yourself, you're still always keeping an eye on other stores, teams, organizations, whatever that looks like. It's that idea and that mentality of that, yes, we want to look at what others are doing and we want to make sure that we continue to perform at that level and we lead by example that way. But let's not just limit ourselves by just beating the next person. Let's really get out there and see what we're truly capable of and redefine what this new goal is, or what this new, spark the power and the engagement and the inspiration of others by doing something truly great and amazing. And I think that's as a leader, how do you do that? You celebrate the wins as you go through. You ask for more and you include them in the work, and you ask them how high is high. Because once they start to come together and realize that just being the best is something they can do, so what's next? And you start to ask those, so what's next, and how high can we go? That's when I truly believe you start to unlock real innovation, real challenge, and you make people think about the business in a very different way.
Yeah, and there's something else I was thinking about too that I think is just as important, and that's the concept of what you talk about as the leader. So I know several leaders of high performance teams that still have a hard time not bringing up a force ranked scorecard, and it's still discussed. And I think if you want to make sure that your team is never really worrying about what the other teams are doing and just what they are themselves are doing, that the information should be available for them to see. But if you're the leader and you're talking about performance and you're talking about what the possibilities are, the bringing up what other teams are doing shouldn't be part of that conversation at all. The information is out there. They can see it if they want to, but as soon as you start to talk about it, they will believe that is what's important to you, is just being better than those teams. So yeah, I think just how you show up every day and what you talk about and your priorities, I think that has a lot to do with it too. The last one that I want to talk about is this concept of commitment, in terms of what people are being asked to commit to when you're talking about growing a team into a high performance one versus when you already have a high performance team. And I think this is a little bit more nuanced, but I think that the teams that do this well are the ones that have the strongest talent pipeline, the strongest bench of people to be able to move up. They're the ones that can absorb the loss of any one person better. Whereas teams who don't have this done right, they are the ones that struggle when a key player leaves or when they're in this kind of growth trajectory. So what do you think is the difference here in terms of what you ask your teams to commit to when they're high performing?
When they're high performing, to me, the commitment becomes more about the team and about how we show up for one another and how we commit to making sure that we don't just pull our own weight, but that we also hold each other accountable to what we know we're capable of doing. So again, like I think that in a growth team, the commitment piece is a personal commitment around making sure that everybody commits to doing what's expected of themselves and meeting the expectations and showing up based on what they're told. And what's expected of them, and what the job description is or the job expectations are. When it's a high performing team, the commitment is to one another. The commitment is to making sure that you don't let each other down. The commitment is to saying, "Don't worry, Chris, I've got you. If you got to go work on that, go handle your thing. I'm going to cover what you need covered." So that you can get that done, because that is more important to us collectively right now than what you're being asked to do. I will take care of you because I know that when I have the same thing that I need to get done, that you'll be there for me. So that commitment becomes more to the larger cause, the larger vision, and the idea of teams that really, really have each other's backs. That's where the commitment is, in my opinion, on the higher performing teams.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I think the reason why this looks a little bit different is because it's very easy to say, well, when you're not a high performance team, if you're trying to grow your team, that it's important to do that. It's important to have each other's backs. And yes, that's true. However, there becomes you can't be expected, or you can't put a focus or a goal on whatever that team goal or team commitment is unless you yourself have mastered what your expectation is first. So you can't send a team of 10 people who have never cleaned a house before to go clean a house. What you do is you assign this person to dust, and this person to do windows, and this person to make beds. And that's what they do, and they have to master that first. And then once what they are doing, what they've been asked to do, becomes almost second nature, almost muscle memory to them, then they become more, the expectation becomes, keep your eyes peeled for where you're seeing other team members fall short. Some people have bad days. Some people have bad weeks or months or bad quarters. Sometimes the job becomes harder for some people because you have difficult clients or difficult customers in certain times. And that could be you one day, or it could be your team member one day. And to be able to pick up that slack when your team member is having a rough time, that's a really important thing to be able to do. In a team that is still growing or is not high performance yet, trying to do that could mean you stop doing the things that you were supposed to do first. And then that's when it all falls apart. It becomes the leader's responsibility to make sure that those balls aren't being dropped at the beginning. But when you're a high performance team, everybody takes responsibility for that. Everybody takes responsibility to make sure they're looking at their team members and going, all right, my stuff's in, my ducks are in a row. Now I have some left over to go make sure that my team members' ducks are in a row. And it's almost this level of self-actualization when it comes to this high-performing team.
Yeah, I agree. And kind of to sum that up, I believe it's a term that I've heard, like an overdeveloped sense of accountability, where everybody is doing something more because they hold themselves to a higher standard. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1 Minute Hack.
The 1 Minute Hack.
Okay, for this episode's 1 Minute Hack, if you're a leader of a team and you have grown that team from one that is underperforming to one that is now high performance, what your team needs from you is different regarding individual strengths, hitting goals, and commitment. So what I want you to do is write down those 3 items: individual strengths, hitting goals, and commitment. And I want you to think about how your support of your team looks differently today than it did when you were trying to grow it into a high-performing team. And if it doesn't look any different, that's a problem. It needs to look different because your team needs something different from you today. And so look at what you do on those 3 areas, and if they focus more on the individuals themselves, so strengths on that individual person, getting them into the right area, goals, what an individual goal is, or commitment, what the individual's commitment is to their own personal goals, those are the things that would be centered around a team that you're trying to grow into a high-performing one. If you're leading a high-performing team, those same 3 things, the support you give to your team, needs to be around what you do for the team as a whole. So it becomes less about the individual strengths and more about how the strengths of the team work together to create something bigger than itself. If you're talking about goal setting, it's not about what Joe or Jane does on their 8-hour shift. It's about what the team can work on together as a goal, where they each have to play a different part in hitting that goal and they can't do it alone. And when you're talking about commitment, making sure that the team knows what the group goal is together, and that becomes more important than what each individual is doing alone. So the vernacular you use when you're talking to your teams, both as individuals and as a whole, needs to change, and what the support looks like for them needs to change every day you show up to work.
Yeah, I think it's a great 1 minute hack, and just understanding that when you move from a growth team to a high performing team as a leader, it really comes down to working with the team collectively and how the team continues to maintain and drive itself from a cultural standpoint to achieve those results and then go even higher than they ever expected.
Yeah, there's a lot of removing of the me and replacing it with the we.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of another episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you guys next time.